if he just completely crumbles in the second half, that contract becomes an albatross. There are very few teams that can overcome that type of deal. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at the Athletic, covering the free-falling Cubs. Patrick, the Phillies come to town down 3 stars, and they have a fourth that can crush another team's hopes, and Trey Turner did exactly that. It's just we don't need to get too far into the details because it's just more of the same. No offense, a star crushing the team. Trey Turner with 2 homers, RBI single. They're not doing enough. Hayden Wisniewski with home run problems. Those continue for him. And this feeling of this isn't good enough and you're being outclassed by the best team in baseball. Just a stark difference in talent level, a stark difference in performance and entertainment value. Cubs fans have to be, or we know, are sick of this and frustrated, and that's why we're doing another mailbag episode, because you guys are frustrated and you guys deserve to have your voices heard and your questions answered. There's just too much bad going on for a team that had high expectations coming into the season and now sits 8 games under 500. It's like every week it's another low point. You could say you can't say this is the low point, because they can definitely fall further down.
Exactly. And Sahadev, I thought you put it well in your latest at the Athletic, of just kind of drawing out the distinctions and comparisons between these two teams and how they kind of went about it, building on what we talked about with our buddy Matt Gelb from the Athletic last time, of just what the Phillies have built. I mean, Philadelphia is not a glamorous free agent city, and yet guys want to go there. It's supposed to be a tough place to play. You saw it last night, how many Phillies fans were traveling. I mean, there was a big section right outside the visiting dugout there, and I'm pretty sure there was a huge "Let's Go Phillies" chant, just like cheering these guys on. Like, it's the vibes are really, really good there. With the Cubs, it's not necessarily bad as much as just like kind of blah, which might even be worse. And I think we got so many good questions here. This exercise helps us think about the team and generate story ideas. And so we'll start here. Sahadev, for you, we got Clay Ilo. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. But Clay writes, when are we going to hear some accountability from Craig Counsell? They hired him because he, air quotes, gets the most out of a team. And that's clearly not the case currently.
Well, I don't know if I agree with him getting the most out of the team. I think the team has to perform. I think this is the big difference between last year and this year is, for those first 3 months, I watched that team and I said, I think this team should have more wins. I think they're playing better than their record states. Your record is your record, but I think they're playing well. I do not even have the slightest bit of that feeling watching this team. They're not playing better than their record states. They're playing down to their record. They have the record they deserve. Counsell is working with what he has, and the players aren't performing. When are we going to start? Listen, Counsell isn't a screamer. He's not a yeller. He doesn't really fully call guys out, but he seems pretty exasperated with his team's performance. I mean, yesterday, he wasn't fooled by that. He wasn't trying to spin that 9th inning, 3 runs off, what they're probably the Phillies' 5th best reliever or something like that. He wasn't acting like that changed anything, because he said there was nothing happening in essentially the first 8 innings. He's frustrated with this offense. We got to do more offensively. That's one of the things we have to do. There's no question about it. Just too many easy innings today. I mean, they're giving outs away to the opposition. Yet, I think you wrote 0 for 26 to end the Brewers game on Sunday. Tuesday, it would have been like 0 for 16 to end the game,
Oof.
and they had those hits against the reliever, and Seiya delivers that 3-run homer. It was a 4 innings, 4 through 8 were nothing, and that's not hyperbole. That was they didn't do anything. They went down in order. Cody Bellinger hit an RBI double and in the third, and then out to end that inning all the way through the 8th inning. Outs, outs, outs. That's it. Against a rookie making his first major league start. And then, some good relievers out of a Phillies bullpen that Gelb told us, they're focused on adding velocity, and they've done that. I don't know when people talk about accountability. Does that mean, like, is he supposed to bench guys and then put in worse players, and then essentially you're not, like, they don't have better players to play? He's trying to win games. He's not giving up on the season, right? So he's not going to start Patrick Wisdom and Miles Mastroboni and whoever else is on this bench. He's not going to start them every day, right? He doesn't believe they're the answer to winning games. He's trying to win games. There's not a lack of effort from the players. Did Cody Bellinger run into an out the other day that he shouldn't have? Sure. I don't think that's because Cody Bellinger is not trying or doesn't care. He made a mistake and he screwed up. When it happens, when things are going bad, that's it's all the more magnified. I think it's similar to the Justin Steele thing on Saturday. Justin Steele screamed and yelled, right? They win a bunch of games, and that's motivational. Hey, he look what he did. He fired up his team. They keep losing, and that's a team coming apart at the seams. It's however you want to read it. It's how you want to read it and how you want to perceive things. I don't think there's something that Craig Counsell can do right now that flips a switch with this team. That's not where this team is right now. It's the talent. It's the players. They need to perform. It's on them. And I don't think accountability, quote unquote, fixes this, because I'm not sure what that means and how that looks. I think he is holding players accountable, but he has to play the players that he thinks gives them the best chance to win.
Yeah, I just think it's hard, though, to say that he's doing a good job. That's the only.
Sure. Did I say he was? Sorry, if I said he's doing a good job.
You did. I think you gave. I agree with your explanation, and I think our next question will kind of get into more of the root causes of this. But it's just a bad look. I didn't want Clay to think that his question was kind of being dismissed. Not that you were dismissive, but just that, like, everything you said was true, Sahadev, but it's also like, dude, you're supposed to be the guy.
Right.
You're the one who's supposed to, like, tighten a lot of this up, and it's just been odd how they play.
It hasn't been good enough. And I listen, I will say that you want to blame Counsell. That listen, the blame has to be spread right now. Everyone gets the blame. I think it goes on the players. And like let me ask the next question here to you, Patrick, because who put this team together, right? It's Jed Hoyer, right? And here's Jay Madden's glasses asking us, what is the best argument for not firing Jed Hoyer?
Well, I personally don't think Jed will get fired. I think there's a much larger conversation about, like, what went wrong this year, what happened. I think if you followed Chairman Tom Ricketts, how he's owned this team, he's always thought about the long term. He's been relatively patient and supportive, and not someone who interferes or looks to kind of break things up. Like, he very much kind of likes continuity, stability. I think this team was sort of designed in a way that ownership wants it to, and that is to kind of sneak into a wild card, compete for the division, not spend like the Dodgers, not spend like the Yankees, and that, they do have pitching in a way that they didn't earlier, and that to me gives a little more credibility of, like, which is why I didn't think the bottom would fall out like before the 4th of July. So I was wrong on that. But I think it would be, look, knowing the circumstances in which he took this job. I mean, Kyle Schwarber, like, Jed was not like, oh, I want to get rid of Kyle Schwarber for nothing. It was, no, I need to make my budget number and cut millions and millions of dollars. And Schwarber was just one, his name came up. That's just kind of how it worked. That was not a talent evaluation thing. The Darvish trade was clearly something that was driven by financial considerations. And so, I think if you look at those circumstances, I think last year happened a little maybe faster than they thought. I think this was going to be the year, and maybe last year lulled them a little bit into a false sense of security. I think at this point, Ricketts knows that baseball is weird. If you look at one-run game, every 3 weeks going your way, the season looks a lot different. They're right in it credibly. And I think they're positioned to go right back at it next year. Let's see what they do at the trade deadline. But I think there's the bones of a competitive team is still in there. I think Jed Hoyer conducts himself with a lot of integrity. He works well with others, and from our understanding, at the highest levels of the Wrigley Field office building. So this isn't really what we think or what the fans think. It's like, what does ownership think? What do Jed Hoyer's bosses think? And I just have a hard time seeing them being just blowing everything up. Now, that sets up, kind of a lame duck year as an executive, final contract year. Do you give him an extension? Probably not. I don't see how that happens. Do you let him see out the entire 5-year term that you had given him when Theo Epstein? I think that is fair to give him the 5 to see what happens. But it's kind of like with David Ross, when it goes off the rails in this kind of unpredictable, surprising, fast way, you let other variables, other voices come in, and you just don't quite know what could happen. All right. We need one. Let's get a little back more onto the roster, the field. We got Kevin W. Ferris for you, Sahadev. What would selling look like for this team? Moving Belly?
Yeah, it's funny. This is what we've been talking about this a lot in the press box, right? It's kind of the discussion among writers. What does this look like? Yeah, I think Belly is a name you have to mention. I think look, he was asked about it. He was asked about it a couple times after the game yesterday. Kind of is it shocking that we're doing this again? We're going to have to start asking you. It's July. The team is, in last place, 8 games under. We got to talk about the trade deadline again. And, he's focused on trying to turn things around because he knows he's gone through this. He has the right answers. But, Belly, I think that's where the obvious answer is. You have to I think it's important to understand his contract. He has an opt-out after this year. I think it kind of it complicates things. Is it something where that hurts his value because teams are fear that if he just completely crumbles in the second half, that contract becomes an albatross? There are very few teams that can overcome that type of deal, right? I mean, the Yankees are probably one. And they could use him. The Phillies could use him, and they're probably another team where it's just we can overcome that if he opts in. If he is the guy, if that's a guy you move, you want him to get hot. You want to see more games like yesterday where he was driving the ball and pulling the ball hard. He only came away with 1 extra base hit. Nick Castellanos stole probably another one. But that's where it starts. And then you start talking about bullpen arms. Is it Tyson Miller, who was already, moved once. Yeah, it could make sense to trade him. Who else in that bullpen? I mean, I guess
who's healthy at that time, right?
Yeah, it's about who's healthy and who's performing. And then I think you start looking at it. Basically becomes who doesn't have a no trade clause, right?
For sure, yeah.
So I mean, look around the diamond. Dansby Swanson isn't being moved, right? Michael Busch is having a good season and is part of the future. You're not moving him. It's going to be hard to move Seiya Suzuki or Ian Happ, right? Maybe you could. Maybe they wait. Maybe Ian Happ waives his no trade clause. I just don't think those are the guys that you focus on. Nico Horner could make some sense when you have guys like James Triantos and Matt Shaw in the minors. And then the starters, I think the crazy aggressive move is trading Justin Steele, right? That's the crazy aggressive move where what you mentioned before, and I agree. The case to not fire Jed Hoyer is look at the pitching development. This has completely been a 180 from the Theo Epstein regime, right? And you have to. They can hang their head on that so far. If you move Justin Steele, you get a haul, right? How you use that haul is what I would be more interested in than saying, look at all these fancy prospects, right?
Yeah.
But that's a different story. I'm just saying, like, I don't think it'll happen, but these are the types of things that have to come up when they're in this situation. Is a shakeup needed? Do you need to change the mix? Because they can't take big steps back to where 2025 is like another step up year where it's like, okay, let's see if we can get close to 80 wins.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, like the previous answer, I mean, Jed Hoyer isn't. I agree with you. I don't think he's going to be fired at the end of this season, but then that final year becomes like really important. 2025 just becomes essential to winning. It's not. This isn't like a perfect roster to start trading guys from. Like this roster wasn't built to sell at the deadline. So if you get creative, if you find ways to move guys and kind of ship guys out, but also bring some guys that can help this year in, I think that would be the most interesting for fans and something that they could be like, okay, I see it. Okay, this could maybe it's a slightly better, and then in 2025 it's a lot better. That's hard. It's really hard to pull off. That's my biggest thing. It's like you can't take huge steps back. How do you pull off a way to like kind of reshape the roster? It's Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, and their front office's challenge. I don't think it's an easy thing to pull off. They're gonna have to figure it out. Patrick, here's a question from C. Charles, 1983. And it kind of touches on where I was going. Would they trade from the 26-man roster to help the offense and or bullpen? He says Horton is close. Horton's hurt, so he's not as close as we think, and we don't really have a timeline there. They're being very, like they always are with minor league injuries. They're being very vague. Brown, I think, is a starter. Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with that. Would they trade Assad or Tyon from the rotation or one of the position players to fill other holes in the lineup or bullpen? This team needs a shakeup. I kind of touched on this, Patrick, but I mean, let's get your opinion on how you view that.
I think they're more. I think you're right to point out the Justin Steele kind of thought exercise. Like it's unlikely, but something we can't dismiss out of hand, and something we'll certainly have on our radar. I think it's important to remember how Counsell operated with the Brewers. And it was kind of constantly thinking about things not black and white. Now you can make the case that the Cubs are a big market team and should not have to think like the Brewers, but the idea would be is there's only so many times on the calendar when teams are trading, and like
Jed loves that too, right? Jed loves
like
putting that in.
If they have 4 or 5 pitchers like get healthy like in mid to late July, like do you move some of those guys, whether it's a Drew Smiley to partially clear that salary, get some of that money back so you can get for that. I don't know how much all of this moves the needle, but whether it's a Tyson Miller, I don't know, Mark Leiter Jr. if he's healthy, like you gotta explore and see what people are willing to give up for that. I'm with you in this idea of like the Cubs don't need more A-ball guys. They don't really need to rebalance their farm system. Is there a trade out there in a way that the Hayden Wisniewski Scott Efros trade a couple of years ago of just like, okay, we think this about this player. They need that right now in their bullpen. Can you kind of get some more near-term major league talent? And so, Tyon is a guy, as you know, who has at least a limited no trade protection. He's a really good pitcher. Is he moving the needle for a team that already has like 3 or 4 good starters? Like, is he going to start the first or second game of a playoff series for you? I don't know. Probably not, right? So, like,
Right.
what are you getting for a guy who may be more like depth on a division winner? And I'm not taking anything like he's definitely a guy you want on your team. He's dependable. He's professional. He's pitching really well. But you look at these numbers with these pitching, and I know this is all knock on wood that we could show up at Wrigley today and they give us injury updates on like 8 different pitchers. They do seem to have a little bit of a relative surplus there. Can you kind of move some of that out and bring in different shapes of talent? Position player side, really tough to see how that works other than Bellinger or maybe Nico. And, Nico is a guy you kind of built around. He's not a thumping offensive player. I'm not quite sure what you'd get for that, but all this stuff has to be on the table, right? Like we're both kind of, we've been thinking about this so much. It'll be fascinating to see how they play it. And that leads into, I've got one for you, Sahadev, from Wiki Woo Woo 1. I don't know if that's Ronnie Woo Woo's cousin or something, but assuming the Cubs miss the playoffs until the deadline, is the most likely scenario Jed returns but has to make the playoffs in 2025 to keep his job. Do you foresee a more aggressive offseason if those are the stakes?
Yeah, so I think we kind of answered that first part, right? Like, yeah, I see it as I think we both agree that he's got another season. And I do agree the pressure's on. The pressure has to be on. And yeah, what does a more aggressive offseason look like for Jed Hoyer? It's a lot of what a lot of the trades that we're talking about now could be explored in the offseason too, right? Maybe you have more teams willing to pay up. If a team is willing to pay a ransom at the deadline, sure, you jump at it, but maybe there are more teams interested come the deadline. Come the offseason, and you can make a move there. What does an aggressive offseason look like? Look, like Danny Jansen was a hot name, a month ago, and then he went and had a disastrous June. And now, like, do you go out of your way to try and sign him and fix the catcher's spot? I don't know if that makes sense. Pete Alonso is a very good ball player. Where does he play on this team if Michael Busch is as good as he looks right now, right? I'm not saying you don't, like, Pete Alonso's not an impactful bat. Like he hits a ton of home runs and the Cubs need that. I'm just not sure if that's the right fit for this team. If that's what Jed Hoyer is going to look at and say, like, that's where I spend big, a first baseman who knows how he ages. There's Willie Adames. He could, I think he's a very quality player. After that, Juan Soto's the name. I don't know if he's leaving New York, right?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
think he's leaving the Yankees. If he is, that's the guy you spend crazy money for, in my opinion. There will be questions about what happens when he gets paid. I get that. You're going to hear rumors about that because there are scouts that are wondering that. I I think that's a really hard thing to answer. I've seen him compete in a World Series and give his all and kind of, stand out when the Nationals won the World Series. As a was he 19 at the time? Maybe he was a little older when they won that
yeah.
World
I think
Series,
he
but
debuted. Maybe he was 19, and then
yeah,
yeah,
either way, he stood out. He was a
yeah, for
superstar
sure.
on the field and helped a team come back from the type of depths the Cubs are in right now and win a World Series. Uh, he is he's the type of talent you risk it for, in my opinion. I don't know if Jed's going to have that opportunity to even do it because of the Yankees. I think the guy that makes the most sense
Mm,
is Alex Bregman. Um, I worry about the age.
yeah,
I worry about the dip in power, but you got to be aggressive and you got to take risks. You've kind of backed yourself into a corner here with that type of stuff. Other than that, it's a really good. I believe it's a really good free agent pitching class. So that's so what gets back to what we were talking about, right, Patrick?
yep.
If you trade Justin Steele and you get a ton for him, now do
Mhm.
you go and you're able to get a bat via trade? Do you go and spend on Max Fried?
Corbin
That's
Burns.
yeah, Corbin Burns. Yeah. Hey, I guess what? I'm sure Craig Counsell has a good relationship with him and would
Yeah,
love to have him on his team. So yeah, those are two names that I think make a ton of sense if you're moving a pitcher, and that's where you want to spend. And now you've kind of reshuffled the deck. We're speculating now and trying to get creative because this is what this season has led
yeah,
to. We're
yeah.
talking about the offseason in July, uh, but I do think it's worth thinking about that type of stuff too. Do they need a pitcher right now? No, they don't need a starting pitcher right now. Does that mean they shouldn't find ways? Like if that's where the money is best spent in the offseason, maybe that's what they do, and then you can move from a area of depth, an area of strength, and try and fill the weaknesses via trade. I think that could be a route. We'll see where everything goes come October and November, and when we have a better idea of what the direction is. But yeah, it is. God damn, Patrick, talking
Yeah.
about talking about the off season in July. I did not
Yeah, it's
expect
not
to
even the 4th
be.
of July
Yeah,
yet, and we're already trying to conjure up like trade scenarios and maybe go back out and sign, this Boris guy who's probably, you know, ticketed for another place already. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, here's a question. I have something to say about this afterwards, but Bob Moore, NV, he asks, this team smells a lot like teams from the 90s when ownership teased fans with whiffs of player potential that never panned out. If you had to pick one sign that ownership was serious about winning the World Series, which would you pick?
All right, Bob. Well, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I mean, the name Juan Soto jumped out to me. We've already kind of covered that. Um, I think the sign is having a payroll like the Yankees or Dodgers, maybe not all the way up there, but a little closer there. And I think one of the frustrations is that the Cubs payroll, taking out the COVID dip years, like has increased from 2016, but it's been a lot more incremental. And you have teams like the Phillies all of a sudden kind of jumping, towards, maybe a top 4 payroll instead of like the ninth payroll, or before Peter Seidler died, the Padres all of a sudden totally reimagining their business model, and that has not happened with the Cubs. It's been very sensible, kind of within, definitely not outside uh, the box. I think this ownership group is not bad in relation to some of their peers in the city. I think you look at Wrigley Field, the renovation, actually winning World Series. I think a lot of their hands-off nature is good, of just authorizing the council hire and not getting caught up in the emotions with David Ross, or letting your president of baseball operations trade away all these guys who wind up sort of falling off a cliff. Like, I think those are good attributes, but to me, it always comes down to follow the money. And Sahadev, I'm curious to hear what you have to say. I love the 90s. I'm sure that sort of conjured up some memories for you, like when you were a kid, yelling at the WGN screen, or, your Ryan
Uh,
jersey or whatever. I don't
right.
know.
Well, I have this theory that if it weren't for 98, the 90s would be looked at as one of the worst decades of baseball for a franchise. Like, just complete, like, just complete disinterest in that team. I love baseball. I fell in love with baseball at a young age. My dad took me to the ballpark a ton. So I watched that team. I watched that garbage. That was my teenage years. They were bad. It was an awful product. And it made me cringe when I read that at first. And I was like, how could you even compare this to the 90s? But honestly, watching this team on a day-to-day basis now, like, I've been, like, it's been hard to watch, and it's been like, you want to disengage. You want to just be like, I got a tweet the other day about something like bring on Bears season. And I was like, this is how bad it's gotten.
Yeah.
People think the Bears are going to save their, sports enjoyment. Like, that's how bad it is. Like, you're going to go to the Bears. They won't hurt you. Like, that's dangerous mentality. Chicago sports fans are in dangerous territory here. I mean, just looking at these standings: fourth place, fifth place. Oh, third place in 1995, when there were 144 games played. Fourth place, fifth place, 98, second place, sixth place in 99 with 67 wins. That's how they close out the decade of the 90s. It was a bad decade. I get it. There was it Jose Guzman instead of Greg Maddux. That's where some of that money was spent. There's the Jeff Blauser signing in the 90s. Running back that 98 team and bringing back that core, which was, I mean, just bringing, like, adding no big free agents when you have, like, some young talent. And it was just like typical, like, this is what they're going to do. They're going to try and sell us that this team can bounce back after and repeat after, like, a amazing 90 win season that nobody expected. Like I said, at first I thought, how dare that person compare the 90s to this? But this season does feel like that. I don't think you've been sold a bill of goods. I do believe there's talent on this team. I just don't, like, they're not producing, and I believe that they're not far off. And I'm not saying this season. I'm just saying you add the right players to this group, a couple pieces here and there, and this is a winning team. We've said it like a ton over the last couple of weeks, the last couple episodes, but you add a big bat, a fearsome bat into the middle of this lineup, and I think it changes a lot of things. It takes a lot of pressure off guys, and everyone else kind of is able to produce, and those runners that are being left on base are driven in and things like that. But it is scary that fans are thinking of the 90s while watching this team. It is a bad situation for everyone involved, fans especially. I don't envy the way fans feel right now, because it's Patrick and I have been talking about it, but
I love this, like,
entering,
a therapy session
yeah,
for your, like, repressed childhood memories. Like, we
well,
shouldn't have put this question at the end.
well,
A whole episode of Sahadev in the 90s.
So there's, we're doing this again, Patrick, where we have to go big picture, where we have to shift our thinking. And it's not like, I love writing about games, and my biggest frustration from, like, We didn't have access in 2020. 2021, we had very little access, and it was hard to write about games, and the team stunk. And like last year, finally, it was like, oh, we get to write about games again. And then the beginning of this year is like, oh, I can do some analysis on games. Nope, out the window now. Like the rest of the season, it's like, what am I supposed to? I'm not writing about a game. We gotta do big picture and profiles. Like, and that's because of what this team is doing on the field. It's not worth breaking down a game, because why does that matter? Win or lose right now, until they show us otherwise, it just doesn't matter. You have to produce, you have to be in contention for those games to matter, and they haven't done it. The 90s, man, come on.
Good. Yeah. I'm glad we got that off our chests. You can share. We could do a story time with Sahadev. Maybe that could be one of our running features, but I think you made a good. That was a good historical perspective that I think was good to hear. So,
yeah, I mean, I wish we could send you all on a more positive note into your July 4th and enjoy your holiday weekend. If you're a Cubs fan, if you want to enjoy things, I would say avoid the Cubs, because it just
go to a barbecue, go to the beach, go to the park, hang out with your friends and family. Maybe check the score. I mean, Wrigley's still a great place to go. I'm sure 4th of July they're going to have a huge crowd. A lot of Phillies fans, but otherwise, don't get too worked up right now.
Right. Try and enjoy your life in other ways. Thanks so much for listening. This is Northside Territory, Foul Territories Cubs podcast. We make sure to rate, review, subscribe, do all that fun stuff for our podcast. We truly appreciate you guys listening. Thank you for sending in all those questions and making us go through this process and think about things in a different way. I love these episodes. It's fun to get riled up and feel the fans' energy, because I mean, you guys deserve to vent. It's a frustrating group to watch right now. So it is very fair to have these complaints and questions and just confusion about how this happened and where it's going. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to read Patrick and my work at The Athletic. We'll be back at you next week. Thanks so much for listening. Take care.